と言ってください。
609の0763です。
609の0763ですね。
はい、そうです。はい、やってきました。じゃあ、姫菜さん、エリさんに聞いてください。
電話番号は何ですか？24640709聞きたいです。
はい。
24640709ですね。はい、そうです。
はい、よくできました。OK、じゃあ、エリさん、マークさんに聞いてください。
電話番号は何ですか
？328の7448
です。
です。Sorry.
328の7448
そうです。
はい、いいですね。じゃあ、マークさん、ベンジャミンさんに聞いてください。
電話番号は何ですか？432の0279
です。
です。
はい。
What is des?
Des means is.
Closure, like.
Yeah. It's literally the verb to be, and it goes at the end of the sentence in Japanese.
432の0279ですね。
はい。はい、ありがとうございます。はい、質問がありますか？はい、皆さんよくできました。はい、じゃあ次は51ページを見てください。教科書の51ページを見てください。じゃあパート4、日本語の学生。So we're going to work on phrases that use no. Okay. So the example, student of Japanese language converts to Nihongo no gakusei. Notice that Nihongo no gakusei is important to clarify that you're saying that the person is a student of Japanese language, not a student of Japan or a student of Japanese people or something. Okay? So, じゃあ1番、let's see. じゃあ、ウィリアムさん、1番お願いします。My teacher would be
Where are we in the book?
51ページ、page 51, the part 4, practicing the use of no in context. So,
Want me to read the first example?
the teacher one, my teacher, what's that translate to?
Sensei what?
Okay, sensei is going to be part of it, that's true. How would you translate my? Okay, what's the pronoun for I? Yes, watashi. What can you add to watashi that turns it? Watashi wa would mean I and is the subject. So watashi wa sensei desu would be I am a teacher. Okay, but my teacher would be no. Yes, watashi no sensei. possessive. It's not the exact same thing as the English possessive, though. It doesn't always follow the same pattern that English follows.
You don't put that after it?
Only if you're turning it into a sentence. Like if somebody asked you, who's that person? And you're saying, she's my teacher. You could say, watashi no sensei desu. Then it's a complete sentence. Okay? Watashi no sensei desu means whoever is my teacher. Person you're pointing to, person you're asking about is my teacher. Okay? Watashi no sensei desu. But these are just phrases, not full sentences. So my teacher is just watashi no sensei. And then you can make sentences extending off of this. So like watashi no sensei desu, like I said, just is saying that person that you asked about or that you're pointing to is my teacher. You could say watashi no sensei wa, and then my teacher becomes the subject of a sentence, right? And you can say something further about that person, like watashi no sensei wa, for example, Nihonjin desu, to use vocabulary you guys already have, right? So you could say my teacher is a Japanese person, right? You see how that works? Or you could say, for example, you could put, this could become the object of your sentence if you wanted to say, for example, Yamada-san. Yamada-san wa watashi no sensei desu. Then you're saying that Mr. or Mrs. Yamada is my teacher. Do you see how all these things work? So does that context help as far as understanding how no works versus how wa works?
Yeah, and how it combines.
Yeah. Okay, so those are a couple of examples. So my teacher is just the watashi no sensei part of all of that. Okay? Okay. じゃあ、Benjamin-san, my telephone number, how would you put that one together?
私の電話番組。
私の電話番号。Yes. 電話番号。Yes. Okay. 私の電話番号。
So
Okay.
mine is always going to be 私の。
That's correct. Yes. Mine is watashi no. So, Mer-san, my name would be
私の名前。
はい、私の名前. And once again, if you want to put that into context, you can do something like 私の名前は blankです. And you can put your name in that blank, right? 私の名前はです. Right? So Himena could say 私の名前はHimenaです. Right? So that this can become part of your self-intro. Right? Okay, じゃあ、Rebbe-san, Takashi is major. Notice that it is Takashi because there's also a name called Takeshi, two different names. Okay, どうぞ。
Takashi no Senko.
Okay, Takashi no Senko. If you say it that way, it sounds like he's like your brother or your best friend or something. What if you don't know him that well?
Takashi-san.
There you go. Takashi-san no Senko. So for now, because Japanese is new for you guys, and because adding san to names is something that you're not in the habit of yet, I want you to do it every time you say someone else's name. Because that'll help you get in the habit. Because in Japan, leaving the san off if you don't know the person well is rude. And we're trying to learn how to speak polite Japanese to start with so that we don't go around offending people and reinforcing the stereotype of the rude American. Okay? Because believe me, that stereotype is already out there. We don't want to reinforce it. Okay? So, Takashi-san no senko would be somebody I don't know well named Takeshi's major, right? What is the one exception? The one name you should never put san on? Your own, thank you. Yes. You know what it sounds like if you put san on your own name?
Egotistical?
Yeah, exactly, egotistical. It sounds like you are snooty and full of yourself. So you don't want to sound like that, right? So, yeah, you put san on everyone else's name, you leave it off of your own name. Okay, Takashi-san no senko. Okay, so let's see, Himena-san, Mary's friend.
メアリーさんの友達。
Hi, Mary-san no tomodachi. And you'll notice that names like Mary, which is from English, not Japanese, get written differently. They're written in katakana instead of hiragana. So for now, you can write them in hiragana because it's the only thing you know how to write, right? So for now, Mary might look like like that. But later, later it's going to look like san. Okay? So what I sometimes suggest people do at the beginning, when they first start learning Japanese and they don't know their katakana yet, any word that should be in katakana, but you don't know how to write katakana yet, you can write it in hiragana because it's better practice than writing it in romaji. And you can underline it as a sort of reminder to yourself that this isn't actually the right way to write it. I'm supposed to write it like this once I learn how to write this. But all of your names, for example, are going to be katakana names. My name is too, because it's not Japanese. Also, words that come from other languages, like computer, written in katakana. Teburu, written in katakana. Doa, written in katakana. If it's an original Japanese word or a word that they borrowed a long time ago from Chinese or Korean, it's usually written in kanji and or hiragana. So if you don't know the kanji for it yet, or it just doesn't have a kanji, hiragana is the norm if it's from Chinese, Korean, or Japanese. If it's from English or Spanish or French or German or Portuguese or any other non-East Asian language, it's going to be in katakana. So country names like Singapore, Singapore is how that one comes out, or Indonesia, Vietnam, those are all country names. Italia, America, France, Spain, Mexico, all of those get done in katakana. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so we'll be learning katakana in lesson 2. But for now, you can write your katakana words in hiragana because we just haven't learned how to do the katakana yet. Okay, so Mary's friend, Mary-san no tomodachi. Okay. Mary-san no tomodachi, like that. Okay. Next one, University of London student. So, Ryan-san.
Is there 2 no's in this sentence?
Good question. It doesn't have to be because University of London is a proper noun. And so the no that might go there can be left out. So, yeah. So can you guess what University of London comes out as in Japanese?
London,
London Daigaku. So that, again, I'm going to write it in hiragana for now, but know that London should be katakana, okay? So London Daigaku. And then
No gakusei.
no gakusei, exactly. No gakusei, like that. London Daigaku no gakusei. And just so you know, if you were to put a no in here, London no Daigaku, that sounds like you're saying the various universities that exist in London, as opposed to the proper noun name of one particular university called University of London. Okay, so London Daigaku is the name of the college. London no Daigaku is like a general noun talking about all of the colleges that happen to be in London. Okay, and that's going to be true of other place names too. So, Florida Daigaku would be University of Florida, probably. And then to distinguish between that and FSU, you'd probably add in something like Florida Shuritsu Daigaku for Florida State. And because shu means state and ritsu means like established by. So shuritsu is like state run or state funded or state founded
So,
institution. So
London Daigaku is, well, like London no Daigaku is like university in London.
yeah, London no Daigaku would be one or more universities that happen to be in London that might be named entirely different things. Okay, but London Daigaku is the proper noun, University of London. Make sense? So yeah, putting that no in this particular case actually changes things rather drastically. So London Daigaku no gakusei is a student of University of London. Okay. じゃあ、キンバリーさん、7番。There you go.
日本語の先生。
はい、日本語の先生。Okay. Notice that Japanese is more precise in this case than English is, because we would often just say so-and-so is a Japanese teacher, and you don't know for sure, is that person a teacher who's from Japan, or a teacher who teaches Japanese, or both, right? But Nihongo no sensei is clearly Nihongo no sensei is clearly a teacher of Japanese language, right? And if you wanted to say a teacher who's from Japan, you could replace that go and turn it into what? Nihon no sensei would be possible, or Nihon jin no sensei. That would be very clearly a Japanese person who is a teacher. Nihon jin no sensei. Nihon no sensei sounds like you're saying teachers who are in Japan, but they might not necessarily be Japanese citizens. You know, I taught in Japan for a year. But, you know, Nihonjin no sensei would be Japanese people who are teachers. Notice also there's no particular singular or plural a lot of the time in Japanese. Okay, so high school teacher, Johnny-san. How would you do high school teacher?
Sensei.
Okay, koukou, right? Koukou is
Yes.
high school. Koukou
No.
no
Sensei.
sensei. There you go. Koukou no sensei. Like that. Koukou no sensei. High school teacher. いいですか? Right. We still have time to do a few more, so let's look at part 5. Mary-san wa America-jin desu. So notice the way they've got that title written, where they've got the katakana in the normal size print, and then they've got that little stuff over the top that is hiragana. You see it? That little print over the top is called furigana. Furigana is hiragana that's put on top in order to guide your pronunciation. It's most commonly used on kanji, but for beginners, they'll also use it on katakana until the katakana is learned. Okay, so children's materials will often have furigana on the katakana if it's aimed at like kindergartners. First graders learn katakana, so they take furigana off of it at that point. And then they start introducing kanji, and they'll put furigana on some of the kanji that the kids haven't learned yet, but that they're going to be expected to learn pretty soon. So like an elementary school reader will generally have a lot of hiragana. It'll have all the kanji that those kids are expected to have learned up to that point, and then it'll have kanji with furigana on it for, say, the kanji they're expected to learn later that year or in the following semester or something like that. So, and then as you get more and more advanced, you look at something that's aimed at middle schoolers, it's got a lot more kanji in it than the elementary school stuff. If you look at something that's aimed at adults, it's got a lot of kanji and very little furigana, because unless it's a very unusual word or unusual reading for that word, they basically assume that adult readers can read all the kanji they need to read a newspaper or a magazine or a novel. So it's only occasional furigana at that point. Okay, and there are paper dictionaries that are called furigana dictionaries because they're aimed at foreign learners, and they actually have furigana on all the kanji. Whereas dictionaries that are aimed at Japanese students learning English usually don't bother with the furigana because they assume that the student knows the Japanese, they only need help with the English. Okay, so let's look at the chart on the next page. Okay, see how there's all this information about each person. You've got Mary, her nationality, her year in school, her age, her school that she attends, and her major, right? And then you've got those same categories for Takeshi-san, Kim-san, Kim-su-san, and Sumisu Robato-san, and Yamashita-sensei, you know, doesn't have a year in school, but he's got the other stuff, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is the examples model sentences that you can create about those. So we're going to use Mary-san as our example and make statements about her nationality, her year in school, her age, the school she attends, and her major. And then we're going to do those same kinds of sentences about each of the other individuals. Okay, so let's start with Mary's nationality. Let's see, Marianne-san, 読んでください. So I'm reading the example for, yeah, the example for nationality.
メアリさんはアメリカ人です。
はい、Mary-sanはアメリカ人です。So let's do the other nationality ones first, and then we'll go on to the next category. So how would you say Kimura Takeshi's nationality?
Maybe Takashi-san.
Takeshi-san, because it's, look at how his name is spelled. It's Takeshi.
Takeshi.
Hi, Takeshi-san.
Niho.
Takeshi-san wa,
Wa.
and then what?
Niho.
Nihon.
Nihon Nihonchi.
はい、日本人。Okay, so, たけしさんは日本人。We're missing a verb still. Anybody? です。Okay, たけしさんは日本人です。Okay. Does everybody see the structure? Okay. What's this wa? Yeah, it's the topic marker, okay? Subject marker, something like that. Okay, it is not the verb is, okay? If you think of this meaning as meaning is, you will confuse yourself, okay? Is over here. Okay, this is why I compared it to Yoda. Takeshi-san, subject marker, Japanese person is. Okay? That's the word order in Japanese. Okay? And later when we learn other verbs like eat and drink and read and write and all of that, those will go in this position in place of des. Okay, so you'll drop the des and you'll add some other verb in that position at the end of a sentence when we get to that point, okay? But verbs in Japanese are always right before the period. They're the last part of the sentence. The only thing that could come after a verb are a few particles that are ending particles. The main one that we're learning in this chapter is ka. Does anybody know what ka does to this sentence? Makes it a question, yes. So ka is like a verbal question mark. Okay? You don't actually need a question mark in Japanese if you're typing the ka. They sometimes just end it with a period after the ka. Okay, so if you say it that way, Takeshi-san wa Nihonjin desu ka? What are you asking? Is he a Japanese person? Yes. Who knows? He could be Argentinian, right? Right? There are lots of Japanese immigrants in Argentina. So Takeshi-san wa Nihonjin desu ka? Is Takeshi a Japanese person? And then you drop the ka, and you get Takeshi-san wa Nihonjin desu. Takeshi is a Japanese person, right? Make sense? Okay, but that is the structure in Japanese, and that's something to get used to because it's so different from English, right? Okay, okay, so nationality for Sue Kim. どうぞ.
Susan wa Kankokujin desu.
はい、スーさんは韓国人です. So same structure, you're just substituting a different name here and a different nationality here. The underlined bits stayed exactly the same, didn't they?
How do I know to read that as wa and not ha?
Because it's the particle. So you have to recognize that this is a vocabulary word.
Takeshi-san, so it's not going to be
Yeah,
ha.
there's no logical way that it would be Takeshi-san ha.
Right.
Okay, Takeshi-san wa Nihonjin desu. Okay, so if you recognize this vocabulary word and you recognize this vocabulary word and you realize that this one does not end with a ha and this one doesn't start with a ha, then you're fine, right? If you're not sure what the word is and you think it could possibly end with a ha, then you've got a problem. But you also need to see that if there's a subject in the sentence, it needs a subject marker. Now, that's the other thing to be aware of. Subject markers are only going to be there if the sentence has a subject. And unlike English, subjects can be dropped in Japanese. So let's say the question was, Takeshi-san wa Nihonjin desu ka? You could answer with, Hai, Nihonjin desu. No subject necessary. You can repeat back just the predicate as answer to a question. You could even ask, Takeshi-san wa nani jin desu ka? Nani jin would be, anybody want to guess? What's nani? What? Jin? Person. So what nationality? Yes. So if you wanted to say, Takeshi-san wa nani jin desu ka? What nationality is Takeshi? You could just answer with Nihonjin desu. You don't have to repeat that part back. This part, it's already assumed that that's the subject of your reply because that's who the question was about, right? So in the answer, this becomes optional. You can say, Takeshi-san wa Nihonjin desu as your reply to that, but the green part can be left out. Okay, does that make sense? You see how that works? The same thing is true with, like, somebody asks you, Onamae wa nan desu ka? Your name is what? And you can just answer with Kim desu. Yeah, you don't have to say watashi wa Kim desu or watashi no namae wa Kim desu. You can just say Kim desu. Cool and easy, right? Okay, so Kim-san wa Hankokujin desu. Same structure. Okay. じゃあ、ライアンさん、スミスさん、ロバートさん。
ロバートさんはイギリス人です。
はい。ロバートさんはイギリス人です。Okay. And 山下先生、皆さん。
山下先生は日本人です。
はい。そうですね。Okay, let's do the same kind of pattern with year in school. So, Eddie-san, part B example, 読んでください。
B?
Yeah, if you go back to the
Oh.
previous page, there's part B, the year in school example.
Okay. Mary さんは2年生です。
はい、メアリーさんは2年生です。So notice we've got the same structure, but now, although our subject is still a person's name, right? The noun that we're using to say something about them has changed, but it still goes in that same structure, right? You, instead of X, Y, nationality, des, you're doing X, Y, what is it, year in school, des, right? Okay, so, Mark-san, Takeshi-san, 読んでください。
Takeshi-san, 4年生です。
What did you forget?
わ
Yeah. Okay, so one more time.
さんは4年生です。
はい、たけしさんは4年生です。はい。Okay, ベンジャミンさん。スーさんは
スーさんは2年生です。
スーさんは what year? Look at the chart. She's a third year student, right?
スーさんは
3年
3年です。
3年生です。3年生。Okay, so the word we're looking for here is 3年生です。Okay, 3年生です。いいですか？ So, スーさんは3年生です。はい。
If it was a 4, would that be one of the,
That's one of the ones that does
does
shift.
shift,
Yeah.
okay.
4年生 shift, 3年生 does not. Go figure. There's no particular reason that I can tell you for why san keeps its but yon loses it. That's just life. Okay? じゃあ、ウィリアムさん。Okay. ロバートさん。
バトさんは4年生です。
4年生です。はい。Make sure you're pronouncing this as nen. Nen. Okay, so 4年生です。はい、ロバートさんは4年生です。いいですか？ Okay, じゃあ、メリアンさん、you're going to read the age example for us. So, page 51, bottom C.
メリーさんは19歳です。
はい、メリーさんは19歳です。19
19歳です。
はい。Okay, so, ジョニーさん、how old is たけし？たけしさんは何歳ですか？
Takashi-san
たけしさんは22
22です。
歳です。
歳です。
はい、22歳です。Okay, he's not the number 22, he's 22 years old, right? So it's important to add the psi there. Oh, sorry. 22歳です。Okay, it's very important to add the psi because if you just say 22です, 22 what? Okay, in Japanese you always have to have something like that unless you're just counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if you're not counting, if you're saying the person's age or the person's phone number or the person's whatever, you have to make it clear. So, 歳 for age always. Okay, so 22歳ですね。じゃあ、スーさん、OK、キムさん、スーさん。
スーさんは20歳です。
はい。OK、20歳です is one way to say that. There's a special word for 20 that even some Japanese young people apparently don't bother with anymore. But I still think it sounds better because that's the way I was taught. Hatachi. Hatachi desu. And it doesn't sound like there's a psi in there, but when it's written in kanji, the psi is there. It's just pronounced as hatachi. It's a special age in Japanese culture because 20 is the year you become an adult by Japanese standards. So hatachi desu is a very important. Oh wow, cool! You're 20. It's kind of like 21 for us because it's the drinking age in Japan as well as the age of maturity. So, hatachi desu or 20歳desu. And you'll notice that anytime you're ending with a ju, it changes to a small tsu before the sai. So 20歳. That's one of the pronunciation shifts I mentioned. And if you want to know more about pronunciation shifts relating to numbers and things that come after numbers, there's a whole chart in the back of your textbook, pages 380 and 381. Right? 380 page. You've got this handy dandy chart in the back that shows you the number shifts for every suffix that this textbook introduces. Okay, so you've got a column at the start with suffixes that keep the standard number pronunciations, and they just listed them. And then you've got, oh, special pronunciation for April, you've got to say shigatsu. It doesn't use yon. Special one for July, it uses shichigatsu, not nana. You know, special one for 6 minutes, ropun instead of rokufun.
What page is that?
380. It's way in the back of your textbook. It's like the second to last page, basically, of your book.
How do you say 44?
Yonjuyon.
Oh, okay.
Okay, just like you would think.
I don't know, the Jew escaped me for a while. I was
Oh,
like,
okay.
Yongyun?
Yongyun doesn't sound right, does it? Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So does everybody know how to find this chart now, in case they want it? So anytime you're wondering whether you're supposed to make a pronunciation shift with a particular number combination, there's your guide. Okay. So getting back to these, so who are we up to here? Okay, so Kim-san said, Su-san wa 20 desu, or Su-san wa 20 歳です. One or the other. Okay. じゃあ、Ryan-san, ロバートさんは
His age?
Yes.
Roberto さんは22歳です。
はい、22歳です。はい、じゃあ、姫野さん、山下先生は
山下先生は47歳です。
はい、そうですね。じゃあ、エリさん、スクール、エグザンプルを読んでください。
メリーさんはアリゾナ大学の学生です。
はい、メリーさんはアリゾナ大学の学生です。Notice there's that same pattern again, like ロンドン大学、アリゾナ大学。Okay? We're assuming that there's only one university called University of Arizona, right? If they have Arizona State also, then they would have to come up with another name for that one. Okay, so メリーさんはアリゾナ大学の学生です。Okay, so たけしさんはマークさん
Takeshi-san wa Sakura 大学の学生です。
はい、そうですね。じゃあ、ベンジャミンさん、スーさんはNo, スーさん。You're doing スーさん school.
Let's see where we're at. Yeah, we're there. I see the chart, but I don't see what we're saying. It's above.
Part D
Oh,
is the example, but you're doing Sue's college.
Susan wa
Soul.
Seoul.
Yeah.
Susan wa Seoul 大学の学生です。
はい、そうですね。スーさんはソウル大学の学生です。So, yeah, Seoul just comes out Seoul in Japanese. Okay, じゃあ、はい。
Is that translation in use?
No, they just kind of wanted you to just pronounce it with a Japanese accent. That's how most katakana words kind of work, is that they're just the Japanese accent pronunciation of something.
Like
If you
English.
can't spell it in hiragana, then Japanese people probably have a hard time pronouncing it. Okay, so Seoul Daigaku. Okay, じゃあロバートさん。So, ウィリアムさん。
ロバートさんはロンドン大学の学生です。
はい、そうですね。ロンドン大学の学生です。じゃあ、メリアンさん。
We're doing Yamashita sensei?
Yes, Yamashita sensei.
Yamashita sensei wa Sakura
はい、桜。
大学の先生です。
はい、できました。Good catch. Yeah, like, wait a minute. Yeah, 山下先生は桜大学の先生です。はい。
For his major, for Master Sensei, is he like a Japanese language teacher or just a Japanese?
I think he's a Japanese language teacher. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what they meant. Yeah. So, okay, so we're moving on to majors now. So, Tony-san, can you read the example for us on how to talk about Mary's major?
Is it the E?
Yes, E.
Mary-san no senko wa Nihongo desu.
Nihongo desu. はい。
Nihongo.
はい。So, メロディさんの専攻は日本語です。Yeah. じゃあ、キムさん、たけしさん。
Takashi-san
たけし。Yeah.
さんの
専攻。
は歴史です。
はい、歴史ですね。わかりますか？ Any questions there? Okay.
Switched.
Sorry?
Though it's not like Maddie-san wa anymore. Is Maddie-san
Okay.
no?
So it's okay. Let's use Takeshi. Okay.
Yeah.
Takeshi-san no senko wa.
Right.
Right? Takeshi-san no senko wa rekishi desu. Okay, because what's it actually saying? Takeshi's major is history, right? Takashi is not history, and he's not a major. He's majoring in history. His major is history. So the possessive goes like that. In English, we can say it both ways. We can say Takeshi's major is history, or we could say Takeshi is a history major. But Japanese doesn't do it that way. You cannot say Takeshi is a history major in Japanese. That idiom doesn't work in Japanese. Okay, so it has to be Takeshi's major is history. So Takeshi's major is the subject, not just Takeshi anymore. Okay? Okay, we'll practice it a few more times, maybe it'll help. Okay, so whose turn was it to do the next one? So Takeshi-san no senkou wa rekishi desu. So Brian-san, Sue-san.
Kim-san no senko wa computer desu.
はい。Kim-san or Sue-san or Kim-Sue-san の専攻はコンピューターです。Computers as in, like software engineering or computer engineering or something like that, right? Okay, so じゃあ、姫野さん、ロバートさん。
ロバートさんの専攻はビジネスです。
はい、ビジネスですね。はい、じゃあ、山下先生。
山下さんの専攻は日本語です。
はい、OK。山下先生の専攻は日本語です。So we can guess that if he's a Japanese teacher now, he must have majored in Japanese language in college in order to be allowed to teach it now. That's the way most colleges work. You have to teach something that you actually studied. They won't hire you to just teach it just because you know it.
Would you put san or sensei?
I would use sensei.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would use sensei pretty much any time. If you're talking about a person who is a teacher, you would use the sensei suffix after their name every time instead of san. Sensei is more formal, more polite than san, and switching it out implies like you're not being that respectful of him as a teacher, which you don't want to do.
If you're a boss, would it be sensei?
Not necessarily. Bosses often go by their job title. So like if he's the section chief, bucho, then you might call him bucho. Or
But never son, because that would be.
it depends. That if his name is Yamashita, Yamashita bucho would be more formal sounding than Yamashita-san. But somebody who doesn't know what his job title is, just knows that he works for the company, might call him Yamashita-san. And his superiors within the company might call him Yamashita-san. But, people who work under him would probably call him Yamashita Bucho. And other bucho within the company might call one another Yamashita Bucho and Yamada Bucho and Tanaka Bucho. Yeah. But there are all kinds of rank terms that are sort of specialized to different fields. So, within companies and organizations that are organized along the same lines as companies, they have rankings like kacho, bucho, stuff like that. And then other kinds of organizations have different terms sometimes. Okay. Okay, so we finished that activity. Now we're going to do some asking and answering questions for the last few minutes of class. We're probably not going to finish this activity, but we're going to start it at least. So let's look at example 1. Let's see, whose turn was it to read? It's Mark's, right?
Sure.
Okay, so Mark and Benjamin can do the Q and the A. Okay.
Which one, number 1?
Yeah, example 1.
Oh, example. Mary-san, Mary-san wa America Jin desu ka?
いいそうです。
そうです。
そうです。
Okay, and then go ahead and read the second example as well for us.
Mary-san wa sensei desu ka?
3年生ですか?
3年生ですか?
And Mark can answer.
いえ、2年生です。
はい、2年生です. Okay, so can you tell from this example, they are using these questions based on this chart that we just went through together. So the idea is for you to ask the question based on the cues they're giving you. Notice they're not giving you complete sentences. They're giving you parts, and they want you to get the practice of putting it together with the correct particles and other pieces that are necessary. Okay? So, Benjamin-san, 1番, I want you to ask William. Question number 1. Turn that cue into a full sentence question.
Mary-san wa
Arizona 大学
アリゾナ大学の
学生
I'm not sure we go
ですか?
Desu ka?
Yeah, that's what, what's missing is the wa and the desu ka. Okay, so, Mary-san wa Arizona 大学の学生ですか? And then, William-san?
そうです。
はい。そうですね。Okay, じゃあ、William-さん、メリアンさんに2番を聞いてください。
Mary-san 1年生ですか?
Okay, Mary-san, what goes where that slash would be?
は
はい、Mary-さんは1年生ですか? もう一度。 もう一度言ってください。
宮城さんは1、2世です。
1年生
ですが、
メアリーさんは1年生ですか？
いいえ。2年生です。
はい、そうですね。2年生ですね。はい、じゃあ、メリアンさん、3番を聞いてください。ジョニーさん、答えてください。
たけしさんは日本人ですか？
2年生です。Wait, what?
What? もう一度言ってください。
たけしさんは日本人ですか？
I'm afraid to do it again. I just got a weird look.
Okay, do you understand what she's asking? たけしさんは日本人ですか？
Yes.
Yes, he is. So, how do you answer yes?
はい。
Okay. What are they giving you to? はい、そうです。Okay, そうです。Okay. はい、そうです。That's what we're looking for, okay? The first time you answered, it sounded like you were saying that, yes, he's a second-year student, and that wasn't the question. はい、日本人です。はい、そうです。One of those answers works. Okay, じゃあ、4番お願いします。What are we asking him?
高橋さんは日本大学の学生ですか？
学生ですか？
学生ですか？
いいえ、桜、大学、just replying, I'm sorry.
That's okay. 桜大学の、
の学生です。
はい、いいですね。日本大学の学生ですか？いいえ、桜大学の学生です。That works. はい、じゃあ、ティムさん、ダイアンさんに聞いてください。5番ですね。
たけしさんは19歳ですか？
いいえ。22歳です。
はい、22歳ですね。Okay, and that's number 5. We're going to stop there because we're out of time. But does everybody understand how that works? Okay, and it'll be Jimena's turn to start on Tuesday. And please finish up the rest of the chapter because hopefully we will get through the rest of the material on Tuesday because we're supposed to have our chapter test on Thursday, right? So make sure you're doing the remainder of the hiragana practice as well. And if you have questions about something that doesn't make sense to you, Tuesday will be your chance to ask me questions before the test, okay? As opposed to panicking after.
Questions about the learning lab?
Uh-huh.
Because we have, there's our to do submitting. Get this, make an appointment or during this to go.
To go to the language lab? No, anytime they're open, you go.
Right, and it's during the summer, they're pretty wide open, so I can go anytime I want. I just have to log
As
my
long,
hours.
yeah, log in your hours and get as many hours
Go
as you
there
can.
and study.
Study, work with a partner if you want, study on your own, do the writing practice, do the reading practice,
Just documented
listen to
study.
it. Yes, documented study, basically, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, and the sign-up sheet made it around. Can you pass me that, Maria? Okay, good.
I drew a blank
was earlier, but couldn't it also be